Chapter 43. A while later, after I finished my tale of me and Galatea's invasion of Hell, Batman was announced to be coming through the Zeta teleporter. "Batman, you are the one doing the debrief this time?" Robin asked, with his mentor nodding, as last time we had a mission, Black Canary did it, as well as having been giving us counseling among other things. "Correct, Robin. I had some time before my own patrol of Gotham, so I decided to do it while Black Canary was looking into a drug smuggling ring." "Yeah, Batman almost always did his patrols after night has fallen in Gotham. With it only being in the afternoon now, it's certainly too early for him to go on one of his normal patrols." Then Batman brought up the holographic map of the separated countries of Eurasia, which was a DC equivalent of how the nation of Korea split apart, but here in DC, they split up in 1855. At this point the nations had very different cultures and were frankly quite hostile to one another, which is why the Peace Summit was so divided. Extremist factions in both nations have been hiring villains, mercenaries, and any decent hired gun they can get their hands on to bring the Peace Summit down, but with Lex Luthor himself taking head to bring the nations together along with the League's protection, the Peace Summit has been going according to plan. Batman explained, and I couldn't help but raise my hand to interject, and seeing Batman grunt in my direction to speak my mind, I spoke. "Any clues as to Luthor's diabolical plot in having the hostile nations come together into a more powerful nation?" I asked, honestly curious, as the whole plot line of this section was a blank to me, as I thought the Light wanted to use Eurasia as a sort of base of operations and gathering place of resources, with how both nations weren't welcoming to the League. Batman nodded, and then he turned slightly and poked the air, making the holographic monitor bring up several large files that I quickly perused and gained a surface-level understanding of what Luthor had planned for Eurasia. He wants the unified Eurasia to give massive tax benefits and be reliant on his company's tech for the next 40 years. I muttered before realizing that despite Luthor being a maniac about Superman, he was still at heart a businessman, and being able to indirectly control a nation that mirrored the size and even greater population than the United Korean nations of my original world would obviously appeal to the bald egomaniac. Yes. We want the tensions between the two nations to stop, as skirmishes aren't uncommon and nuclear war has been brought up between the two powers. So in order to avoid such a fate, the League is willing to allow Luthor to play his games under our watch so he can work his charisma to bring the two leaders of the nations to the table. Batman explained, and then the holograms disappeared as the masked hero looked to me in particular. "Lord, you are the oldest, and frankly you tend to look and ask the right questions, so I, as the chaperone of this team, nominate you as a leader." At that, Batman looked around to the other protégés. "You all have great potential and could even be the leader, but most of you have deficiencies that would make team cohesion difficult, such as Robin and Kid Flash leaving the team behind to do their own jobs, among other things." The Batman went on to explain how even in Justice League in particular he rarely took leadership position, with how he typically skulked in the shadows. "Now, Lord, with you being able to use electronics, I have prepared a set of communication equipment due to you still being unable to be synced up to Miss Martian's mental link," Batman said, taking a package seemingly out of his cape fucking somehow, "and once I opened it I got a nice earbud and a couple of cell phones. That phone is for missions and that other one is for civilian use. Don't get them confused, as the personal one has some privacy and the mission one will be logged in case of an investigation is needed." Batman warned, and I nodded as I slipped the earbud into my ear. But honestly, I doubted the so-called personal cell phone wasn't bugged to all hell, as Batman was a paranoid asshole, having already shown he was willing to slip trackers into my costume and even my food. With a flourish, I dropped the cell phone into the air, and momentarily I thought I saw Kid Flash running to catch, but just before the hard-to-see blur almost reached it, the personal cell phone disappeared into the void and landed into Hugo Mundo, my reality marble. Kid Flash groaned as he came out of his super speeding, pouting at me for shutting down his cool moment, as Batman took an extra glance at my trick before huffing and left through the Zeta teleporter. "All right, Megan, I suppose we are flying to Eurasia, seeing as we have no Zeta teleporters in the area," I announced, and even Megan grumbled about the long flight ahead of us. Despite her bioship being able to go fast as hell, it would still be a couple-hour flight. "That's fine, Jake and I can just talk in the back," Galatea said, taking my hand between hers, and we began walking towards the hangar, with Kid Flash's whine about our PDA sounding like a dog's squeaky toy being stepped on. Even as we all began walking towards the bioship in the distance at the end of the hangar, I heard Superboy muttering to Megan with my enhanced hearing. "Should we be holding hands as well?" Honestly, he sounded legitimately confused rather than jealous or even desiring the same interaction me and Galatea were having. Yes, of course," I heard Megan say shamelessly as she took Superboy's muscular arm against her chest. This is totally what couples are supposed to do. Oh God. With how forward Galatea was, I realized that Superboy was going to take hints from his sibling and neither of them knew how a relationship worked. But feeling Galatea's form-fitting leotard-clad body all but draped over me as we shared a seat on the bioship, I decided that complaining was something I most certainly wasn't going to do as our ship began its flight towards Ralasia, basically on the other side of the world.